Go ahead.
Okay. So we're here to deliver DSA's open letter to Greg Harms, who's the executive director of the shelter, the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless. They provide a much needed service to the Boulder community for housing people in, well, not housing, but providing shelter for people who desperately need it. The homeless population continues to grow as Boulder continues to get gentrified and people get priced out of housing. The shelter has a number of actually very dangerous policies that have resulted in one death already prior. Benjamin Harvey, who froze to death on Christmas Day last year for the crime of tapping on a window when he was a few minutes late for the shelter's arbitrary mail collection window. He was banned for a year and then froze to death on the park bench. And there's no way for shelter residents to get any sort of justice from the shelter. It's a private nonprofit, and even though the city demanded that they have binding arbitration, the shelter said no, and the city council kind of folded. So they have mediation, but that just means both parties, the shelter and the resident, if there's any issue like someone getting kicked out for bullshit reason, which happens all the time, they have there's no way for them to seek justice. So our first demand is that we need binding arbitration for the shelter. Also, we need all current suspensions reevaluated, and every person, every resident who has been sent to the shelter through coordinated entry, which is their sort of high priority funnel to services, be readmitted immediately. It's really cold. I wouldn't be able to sleep out here. And third, we need people who have experienced homelessness, either presently or in the past, on the board of directors. The people that are living here should have a say in how it's run. So we are going to have some speakers talk about these issues, and then we're going to go and deliver a nice letter that's been signed by like 280 people and a number of orgs around northern Colorado, and we're going to go try to deliver it to Greg Harms.
Right.
Yeah.
Where's my
air horn?
in the letter, right?
Where'd it go?
Does anyone else want to
Oh,
sign
it's
it?
over here.
Yeah, I think the best light is basically where these guys are standing, and we should have speakers in front of them.
Did they kick us out from the door? Should we just read it there?
So we're gonna read here and then go over there and deliver our song.
Okay.
Darren suggests that.
Sounds good.
Oh wait, let's get in order here. So, should we start with the talks?
Yeah.
Wait, but do we have all our... Eric, who's like a really good filmer, is supposed to be on his way. We're not totally sure if he is, but...
Okay.
In the meantime, can you answer a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you expect from Greg Harms? What would you like him to do?
We would like him to read our letter, acknowledge the issues with the shelter, and seriously agree and consider enacting our demands. Ideally, I mean, we need these changes to happen. We would hope that Greg Harms, being a good person, being someone who cares for the homeless, would take this very seriously. And yeah.
Have you had communication with him before?
We have. We notified him that we were coming. He sort of said, "Oh, I won't be there. You know, I won't be there that night. We can arrange a meeting at another time." So we're still here. He should, if he really cares about this issue, you know, he should show up. We hear that he's not here a lot. So I think he should work more. And but we will meet with him as well when that works for him.
I can't read this on my phone. Can you make sure you're in the light?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey. Yeah. So you think it's better we give it that building behind the gate? I just think we need to be on public.
The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members.
While we're doing most of it, and then only walk on their property to deliver the letters, and then
Practices that have led to people losing their lives in Boulder. A whole year has gone by since Benjamin Harvey's totally preventable death, and in spite of many recommendations made by our city council, made by community members, the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless and Executive Director Greg Harms have done nothing. So we are here tonight to demand that these changes be made.
Yeah, what do you guys think of doing it on the sidewalk? Darren says that's public property and we could do it.
It actually is.
And we just found out that one of the city council members like basically called the cops on some people that were living behind the Walmart on Diagonal Plaza, and they just started doing sweeps of that area. It's just disgusting that the impulse to punish someone, to kick them out if they're living on the streets, like it's like that's something they want to do, is disgusting. The impulse should be to help, to say, oh, we're doing something wrong, we're not providing housing, we're not providing shelter.
Right.
Like no one wants to live in a fucking parking lot, and nor should they.
I just checked and apparently it's 31 degrees. So the emergency shelter thankfully is open tonight, but if it was just 1 or 2 degrees warmer than this, which is extremely cold, there would not be an emergency severe weather shelter. So anyone who had been suspended from the shelter like Benjamin Harvey was would not be able to have a bedtime running.
The decision is also made in the morning about whether or not to keep it open. So, yeah, and they don't change it if it becomes colder.
Who here thinks they could tell the difference between 32 degrees and 31 degrees, 33 degrees and 32 degrees?
Not me. I'd
All
be just
feel
as dead.
cold.
Yeah,
Just as dead.
yeah. Yeah, I have gloves on and my hands are going numb.
Yeah, if I can add on the piece about the RVs getting kicked off, they got a trespassing charge, and it's not clear at all. In fact, it appears that the only person who complained was Bob Yates, city councilman, who's trying to make the police his own private security force against our homeless community. Because to actually enforce, for the police to actually enforce a trespassing charge, they need to get a complaint from the property owner, and it's not clear at all that that happened. And so it's very possible that these guys are getting kicked out on a false claim with no standing, such that legally they should still be there. So at 8 a.m. in the morning they're supposed to leave, and one of our city council members, Jill Adler-Grano, is going to be staying there with one of our housing advisory board members, Mason Moyer, to be there in solidarity with them. But it's quite possible that there could be legal action to defend those folks if we could get lawyers to do that.
Nice.
Alright. So I guess the plan is we're going to go to the sidewalk and speakers will speak and then we'll deliver the letter ideally to Greg Harms himself, right? Alright.
I think we'll.
That's what's up.
Well, yeah, this dude is like looking at us.
That's definitely him. It's all wave. Right below you.
Up in the top window is the offending person.
At least watching us.
He looked like that.
In office, you can kind of see him over there. In office, I know.
Need arrest!
Not to be arrested!
People 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 need arrest!
Not to be arrested!
Why don't you get out of here? I don't see you staying here. Why don't you go? Give us some peace. Yeah. Let's stay right out here.
everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Megan, and I am here as a representative from the Boulder County Democratic Socialists of America, DSA. But more so, I am here as a neighbor, as a community member. I am here, we are here, because it is past time somebody spoke up about the dangerous and inhumane practices of the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless. As you may know, we are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of Benjamin Harvey's completely preventable death. Benjamin Harvey was a longtime Boulder resident who, after going through coordinated entry and being referred to our shelter, was turned away by shelter staff. The reason? 9 months earlier, he had tapped on a window after arriving 1 minute late for the mail pickup time. Rather than showing empathy or respect for a fellow human being experiencing a moment of frustration and human weakness, the shelter staff declared him violent and banned him from services for a whole year. The night he returned to the shelter, they reminded him of this small mistake and sent him away. He died that night, following the city's camping ban law that forbids people, but not dogs, from coverings like a blanket. He froze to death. There was a public outcry after Benji's death, which led the Boulder City Council to recommend that the shelter make a number of policy changes that might protect residents from such a fate in the future. These protections would have given residents the right to challenge shelter suspensions and bans through a process of binding third-party arbitration. The shelter and Greg Harms refused. In fact, a whole year has passed and the shelter has made no substantive changes. In the meantime, we, allies and advocates for the people experiencing homelessness in our community, have been asked for help. Shelter residents fear speaking up because even small infractions like a disrespectful tone can lead to severe punishment. Our neighbors experiencing homelessness have come to us with stories that people are still being subjected to arbitrary and inconsistent rules, that people are still being kicked out for minor offenses with no warning, that residents live in fear of misstepping around a cranky staff member lest they be turned out onto the cold streets. And so tonight we are back. We are back to be a voice for the voiceless. We are back with a letter of demands for Greg Harms. We are back with the strength of more than a dozen community organizations, and we are back with the pledge of support from nearly 300 community members. More every day. We are back to demand justice and to hold Greg Harms accountable. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, you get to be one of the 160 or less people a night to stay at the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless. You'd be lucky because in the last year, 2,500 people have sought help, leaving most from getting a bed, a caseworker, a chance to overcome what left them homeless. Even if you are one of the lucky 160, the shelter mandates that clients be respectful. This is an incredibly vague term, and often simply responding to staff in any manner beside full and immediate compliance is considered disrespectful. In the 2018 University of Denver Law School report on homelessness in the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless, Executive Director Greg Harms was interviewed and shared that any staff member can issue a violation to an individual for breaking this contract. When exited, that individual is told to leave the property for a period of time and can even be permanently banned. Harms further shared that the shelter provides the staff no guidelines with regard to punishment length or type when there is a rule violation. To put this in perspective, for failing a vague demand from shelter staff to respect my authority, the same staff, given no guidelines on punishment, can kick you out for a day, a week, a year. Should you find either the alleged infraction or the punishment unwarranted, tough luck. You can file a grievance. But guess who reviews such complaints? Shelter management. I've helped someone try this process. and I can tell you it's a sham. Just like the police policing the police, shelter management has always stood up for the shelter staff from the numerous stories people have shared with me.
Yep.
This was enough for the Boulder City Council to request the shelter submit to an independent review when people are kicked out that wish for such a process. If this were a government service, it would be required by due process. But Greg Harms has refused. Instead, another sham process was put in place. People kicked out can request, if they know about it, a problem unto itself, they can request mediation. But the manager of the mediation service told the Boulder Human Relations Commission that since Benjamin Harvey's death nearly a year ago, they've only spoken with 4 people who had received suspensions. Guess how many times anyone from the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless has shown up to any of these discussions with a mediator? That would be 0, nada, nilch. The sham process of even non-binding mediation doesn't exist. Another thing the Boulder City Council asked for was that anyone kicked out receive an offer of transportation so they can be safe for the night. This too was a bridge too far for Greg Harms and company at the shelter. One person I know showed up at the shelter in the evening only to be told they were kicked out for receiving too many warnings. No ride was offered. The shelter put that person's life at risk, failing to take even a low-cost and humane step to ensure an easily achievable modicum of safety. I'll end with the warning system. It's another sham process. People staying at the shelter often have no idea they have reached the 3 or 4 warning count that gets them kicked out. Shelter staff doesn't tell people when they receive a warning, and at least in some, but maybe all cases, they wait until the person comes from across town to get their bed to tell them they can't stay because too many warnings have been issued. Issued, but no notice given. So people staying here have no idea what they did wrong. They just know they have to leave the property, and no transportation is offered. Did you walk 5 miles to get here? Too bad. Could we have told you in the morning when you left not to bother coming back? Yes, but we don't. Could we buy you a bus ticket to help you seek safety? We could, but we don't. Could we let an independent reviewer decide whether the warnings were legitimate rather than arbitrary and capricious? We could, but we don't. The shelter is here to help people at the end of their rope, not teach them a lesson. It's time the Boulder shelter learned that lesson.
Yeah.
Greg Harms, step up, do the right thing, and implement our demands.
Yep.
Boulder Revised Code 6-1-7 requires every pet to have shelter. But under Boulder Revised Code 5-6-10, the camping ban, humans are restricted from shelter of any sort down to a blanket. In Boulder, rich Boulder, our homeless neighbors are treated worse than dogs. If you're homeless in our city and you can't get into this shelter, the law says too bad, go freeze. And that's exactly what happened to Benjamin Harvey on Christmas Day when he froze to death on a 10-degree night. That was a direct consequence of Boulder City law. It was a legal death by exposure in our city. Last September, in Martin versus the City of Boise, Idaho, the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that if shelter is not accessible or adequate, it is cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment to penalize people for seeking said shelter themselves. And that is exactly what the City of Boulder does by ticketing folks and jailing folks for the crime of using a blanket under its camping ban, even when they can't access the shelter. The exact pair of circumstances the court ruled was unconstitutional. The University of Denver Stroom College of Law reported that in Boulder, camping ordinance citations are given to people experiencing homelessness at a rate 500 times higher than housed individuals. You want more? Homeless members of our community face excessive scrutiny from laws like smoking tickets, which they receive at a ratio of 300 to 1 compared to housed persons. There's a pattern. The City of Boulder policy is clear. No more homeless people. Lock them up, bust them out, let them freeze as long as they disappear. City policy will only change when us residents say no more, when we force them. No more deaths in our streets.
And this is our open letter to Greg Harms, Executive Director of the shelter.
Can I hold this for you?
Oh, yeah, sure. I can hold that.
All right.
Maybe. Mr. Harms, last Christmas in the early hours of the morning, a man named Benjamin Harvey was found dead in Boulder near the University of Colorado. Facing a year-long ban from the homeless shelter, Harvey froze outside in 10-degree weather without a blanket or a sleeping bag due to the city's inhumane ban on urban camping. Despite the fact that Boulder Shelter for the Homeless employees referred Harvey to your shelter through the Coordinated Entry Program, his one-year suspension from the facility still prevented him from accessing a bed for the night. An infraction of shelter rules should never be a death sentence.
Yeah.
Under your leadership, people experiencing homelessness are subject to the arbitrary and capricious enforcement of shelter rules, often resulting in expulsion from the shelter on unreasonably short notice, with insufficient warnings and no offer of transportation, even though City Council created a requirement for transport to other services in the event of a suspension. With winter approaching, we fear that these policies will lead to even more deaths. Resident efforts to draw attention to the inconsistency, favoritism, and disturbing lack of transparency in staff decision-making are met with further punishment. So they are faced with two choices: obey shelter authorities unconditionally or risk being sent out into the streets. Not only that, but your facility is run without public oversight, despite receiving 1/3 of its funding from public sources. All of this amounts to an alarming lack of accountability for shelter staff, especially considering that they wield power over their residents' access to warmth, food, and a place to rest. It is clear that something must change. In order to prevent future tragedies and injustices in our community, we demand binding third-party arbitration for resident grievances.
Yeah.
Since Benjamin Harvey's death, the shelter has utilized the city's community mediation services to handle disputes, but only in a non-binding capacity. Given the grave consequences posed by unfair suspensions from the facility, this is not enough. Allowing community mediation services to make binding decisions would ensure that conflicts are resolved more fairly, and we hope that it would amplify the voices of Boulder's most disadvantaged citizens. We also demand that all active suspensions be re-evaluated by a third party, and that suspended individuals referred to the shelter through the coordinated entry system be allowed back.
Yeah.
Only those with the highest need are referred to the Boulder Homeless Shelter, but those facing prior bans are blocked from receiving the care they need. Those who are banned must sleep on the streets, sometimes in dangerously low temperatures. The severe weather shelter opens doors in freezing temperatures or snow, but many still face obstacles such as transportation. The risk of unfair suspensions is just too great, and those decisions should be reassessed.
So who has a current temperature?
31 degrees. Finally, it is important that residents at your shelter are represented by people who truly empathize with their position and understand the struggles they face. Therefore, we demand that individuals who are currently or formerly homeless be given a place on the shelter's board of directors. No one better understands the needs of people experiencing poverty and homelessness than those who have dealt with it firsthand. It is necessary that those individuals are given a say in how the shelter is run. The people of Boulder refuse to stand by while the city's most vulnerable are denied their basic right to shelter, putting their health, safety, and lives at risk. We refuse to believe that people experiencing homelessness forfeit this human right by failing to act with perfect compliance and obedience towards authority. In a society that punishes poverty and criminalizes homelessness, the very least we can do is ensure that disadvantaged people are treated with fairness and dignity within the very structures designed to help them.
Yeah.
And I actually have a list of all the organizations who signed on my phone. Sorry, I got it. But I just realized that would be hard to read. Sincerely. Boulder and Broomfield County Democratic Socialists of America, Boulder Rights Watch, Boulder ISO, Denver Homeless Out Loud, Surge Boulder, NAACP's Boulder Branch, DU's National Lawyers Guild, Fem Left, CU Boulder's Committee on Rights and Compensation, the Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center, the Front Range Mutual Aid Network, and the over 280 concerned individuals who signed our online petition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
So now we are going to give the letter to, attempt to give the letter to Greg Harms. Let's do it.
Do you have another copy, or are we going to use this big copy?
Yeah, I will use that one.
Okay. All right.
So it's a different one.
Oh. Okay.
All of us?
Yeah. If you don't want to, we're just gonna go up to that door.
So, here's the letter.
Okay.
We can tell them that it doesn't have every name, that it has, the list has been growing and growing. What can I hold?
Oh yeah.
And then do we want this or no? Maybe not. We seem to have their attention.
Yeah, for sure. Cool.
I think we gotta go that way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is Greg Harms here?
So we've been asked to take the letters on his behalf.
Is Greg Harms here?
He communicated with the person that communicated with him, that he would not be here tonight. We've been asked to take the letters, so that's what we're doing.
And what are you doing with the letter from here?
We
So
will
we'll
deliver
pass
it
on
to
him.
Mr. Holmes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
People need a rest.
Not to be arrested. People need a rest.
Not to be arrested.
People need a rest.
Not to be arrested.
People need a rest. Not to be arrested. People need a rest.
Not to be arrested.
People need a rest.
Not to be arrested.
People need a rest.
Not to be arrested.
People need a rest.
Not to be arrested.
People need a rest.
Not to be arrested.
That's not body bags.
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 House the poor, tax the rich.
House the poor.
Tax the rich. House the poor.
Tax the rich.
House the poor.
Tax the rich.
House the poor.
Tax the rich.
House the poor.
Tax the rich.
House the poor.
Tax the rich.
House the poor.
Tax the rich.
House the poor.
Tax the rich.
House the poor.
Tax the rich.
Okay.
Success.
Good work.
Yes. Thank you all for coming out. This is awesome. This is a great showing. We definitely got the message across.
I would say yeah.
So from here we keep pushing. We're gonna meet with Greg Harms. We're gonna let him know he has till January to commit to enacting these changes. And if he doesn't, he'll regret that. It's not a threat. It's just it's a non-violent promise.
Well,